Exactly. Very good. Julia, just on time. We're starting this moment. Okay, shalom everyone. We're starting a new chapter after having gone through the entire chapter of Bishul, of cooking, and the chapter of Achzarat Manashiyah. All that was discussed. Very nice accomplishment, I must say. So now we're continuing to a much, much easier chapter, much shorter chapter, which deals with various different, I would say, various different, not even rabbinic, but somewhere along the lines of being careful to ruin the spirit of Shabbat. That's maybe the best way to define this chapter. We don't want to ruin the spirit of Shabbat, and not even if necessarily there's a prohibition involved. So all various different examples. Actually, it's a very random type chapter, meaning there's no common denominator of all the different types of situations we'll be talking about. It's just a random collection of different situations that may ruin the atmosphere of Shabbat. So we'll begin with Avodat Miltzarut b'Shabbat, the whole issue of accepting work on Shabbat. Meaning, if one, let's say a caterer or the waiters, be a waiter on Shabbat for a kiddush, for an event. So that's work. People get paid for doing all this. Can one work on Shabbat and get paid for the job? Of course, they're not going to be doing any melacha. That's not allowed. It's not pikuach nefesh. If there won't be a kiddush, maybe that the community will stone the person. But no, that's just a joke. But if it has any involvement of a melacha, of course, you can't do it. But if everything is prepared ahead of time, all the food is ready made, it's just to set the tables, just to display the food, clear away everything, all that is totally permissible on Shabbat. The question is, you're getting paid for doing all this, and one take a job on Shabbat. Now, by the way, I mentioned clearing away. I think we spoke about Sudash. Did we speak about Sudash Lishit? Oh no, sorry, that was in the men's year, the Sunday morning men's year. I just mentioned it there. So I'll say it here also. Clearing away from the table after Sudash Lishit is problematic. Even at home, nothing to do with work and being paid for doing anything. Just clearing away from the table because you're really preparing for Motzei Shabbat. You don't need a table anymore for Shabbat. You finish Sudash Lishit. It's just a few minutes before Shabbat terminates. You don't need a table to use the table for anything further. So clearing away from the table is really to prepare for Motzei Shabbat, to finish up quicker the work you need to do for Motzei Shabbat. You're using Shabbat to start the work of clearing away. That's the reason we can't wash our dishes after Sudash Lishit, because again, you're preparing for Motzei Shabbat. There's no need for the Shabbat itself to have the dishes washed. You're not going to use them again. You're just using Shabbat to take away some of the work you will need to do on Motzei Shabbat. So that's called Hachana. Mikodesh Lechol, we mustn't do that. Only one case do we allow removing from the table after Sudash Lishit, away, and that's only if you do wish to sit around the table as a family or even an individual who wants to sit around the table to read something, to discuss things, to play games. You have sometimes during the summer, when the longer Shabbatot, we could even have a long time after Sudash Lishit to yet be in Shabbat, and then we'd like to play games, we'd like to talk, to sing, and we wish the table should to be as clear and clean as possible, because it's not a nice feeling to be sitting around a table which has all the dishes, dirty dishes around, and all the different remaining foods and all that. You want to clear away the table in order to have a nice atmosphere while we're still in Shabbat. So the answer for that is you're allowed to. In this case, you're allowed to remove everything from the table, because you're not clearing it away. Instead of doing so on Motzei Shabbat, you're using the time on Shabbat to have everything done quicker than waiting for Motzei Shabbat. That's not the purpose. The purpose is you want on Shabbat itself to enjoy the time left over on Shabbat. So therefore, you're clearing away. So it's really necessary for the Shabbat itself to feel better on Shabbat itself. Therefore, it's not a chana. It's not only to prepare, and therefore you're allowed to remove in that case. But if you're anyway leaving the room, or you're going to the living room and sitting down, or to the kitchen, and you're not going to be sitting around the dining table, then you cannot remove anything from the table. If there's some remaining food that you're afraid that if you leave it out, it may spoil, then of course you can take it back into the refrigerator, because you don't want it to spoil. That's not to prepare for Motzei Shabbat. It's really just to make sure the food stays good. So that's another thing. That's another situation where you are allowed to clear away the actual food itself that remains out and may spoil, especially in the summer. It's hot, it may spoil. Okay, so by the way, so going back to a communal kiddush, this is a very big issue. If you have a social hall, like we used to use in our shuls for events, so you've got the use of the social hall for Kiddush in the morning, Shabbat morning, and then no one's going to use that social hall till the end of Shabbat. Normally, we don't use it again. Sometimes there is an event in the afternoon, sometimes they talk and it's done there, or I don't know, maybe kids sometimes use it as a playroom. If there is some use for that room during the remaining hours of Shabbat, then of course you can clear away the entire Kiddush, because you want to use the room for Shabbat during Shabbat itself, so it's okay. But if that room will not be used till the end of Shabbat, then the caterer and his workers and the waiters and whoever was helping to display the Kiddush and bring out the food and set the table, they cannot remove everything, and they cannot clear away all the tables on Shabbat, because they're preparing for Motzei Shabbat. They could do it easily Motzei Shabbat. They just don't want to bother. They don't want to waste, quote unquote, waste their time Motzei Shabbat when they have time on Shabbat. But that's exactly what we mustn't do. We mustn't use the Shabbat in order to avoid the need to waste, quote unquote, our time on Motzei Shabbat. It's the exact opposite. We're wasting the precious moments of Shabbat for doing something that should be done Motzei Shabbat. That's why that's not allowed. Unless the social will be used later on during Shabbat itself or something, then you need everything cleared out and clean. Or there's some food, leftover food that's out on the tables, and then you need to put it back in the fridge because it may spoil. That's definitely fine. But all the plates, utensils, food that's anyway going to go to the garbage and not going to be reused, all that you mustn't clear away if the hall would not be used till the end of Shabbat. I know this is something that is unknown many times, because a lot of caterers do clear away everything on Shabbat, and they put all the tables away and all the chairs away, all that too. How can they put the chairs and tables away? If it's not bothering anyone, no one's going to use the room. Only because they want to save time on Motzei Shabbat, not to have to do Motzei Shabbat. But that's exactly what we're not allowed to do. We're not allowed to save time on Shabbat, to do things on Shabbat, to save time in the weekday. So all that is problematic. I know that it's done in many, many shuls. I know that in Olari, I'm not in charge because I'm not the rabbi of the community. But when we have a private event, let's say the Kollel, a few Shabbatot every year, we used to get together, all the Kollel members with their wives and children, and have a meal, Shabbos meal together to get everyone acquainted to one another, the families acquainted to one another. Like we call it gibush, legabesh. I don't know what the word is in English. So we used to have a meal together. So I always used to warn them in the end of the meal that we should leave everything out, again, except for the food that may spoil. And we had to return Motzei Shabbat to clean everything, and take care of everything. You know, it's actually quite bothersome. We've gone home. Motzei Shabbat is Motzei Shabbat. We'd like to be at home, cleaning out from Shabbat or going out for something fun. And yet we have to go back to the shul in order to clear everything away, put everything back in place. But that's the holiness of Shabbat. We should use the Shabbat for good things, for positive things, for important things, and not to clean up unnecessary things. Okay, so that's from that point of view. But now let's go back to the discussion whether one can be paid for a job they're doing during Shabbat, even though the job itself is totally permissible to do. No wrong action, no sinful action, no prohibition is being transgressed. But the mere fact that you're working and being paid during Shabbat. So the answer is as follows. If you're doing something that's not for a mitzvah purpose, letzorach mitzvah, it's a weekday type thing. For example, if we take the fact that a waiter at an event on Shabbat, that could be considered a tzorach mitzvah, because a kiddush is a mitzvah, a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah or Shabbat chatan or Shabbat sheva brachos, all those are mitzvah events. So that's all considered tzorach mitzvah. But if it's, let's take a birthday. It's not a birthday. Someone's 30 or 40 or 50 years old, and the family wants to make them a birthday. That's not a mitzvah event. And they want some waiters to help them out. They want a caterer to set up, to prepare the food before Shabbat and set it up during Shabbat. And the caterer is getting paid not just for preparing the food on Friday or Thursday, they're getting paid also for the hours they put during Shabbat. So the answer is as follows. If it's for a mitzvah purpose, then one is allowed to work even and get even paid for the work he does for mitzvah purpose, but it's not so useful. Why? Because it says in halacha that even though you're allowed, eino es siman bracha, meaning the money you earn for any work you do during Shabbat, even if it's for mitzvah purpose, which you're allowed to, the money you earn, you won't really enjoy. You won't really benefit. You're going to lose it some other time. Sometimes people are surprised. How come they were caught by the police speeding and they got a 500 shekel fine? Or they parked the car somewhere and they got a 100 shekel fine, or whatever it is. Or they broke a plate or a bowl and they have to buy a new one. The answer sometimes may be because Hashem is taking away from you non-kosher money, meaning money you earned wrongfully. Now, I'm not talking about chas v'chila stealing any money, or stealing any object. That's of course terrible, and that Hashem is gonna make it happen that you don't gain from anything of that sort. But even like we said now, a job you took upon yourself which has a mitzvah involved, and you were allowed to do so, and you're allowed to get paid, even so, that money is not going to bring you too much blessing. Why is that? We'll soon talk about the situation where it's a non-mitzvah job. We'll talk about that in a moment. But why is it all together? What's behind all this? that one shouldn't be working on Shabbat and get paid for a job during Shabbat? The answer is because it looks like mekach umemka. It looks like selling and buying. It looks like doing business. It looks like you're involved in weekday chores. Anyone who earns money while working for something is like a business, is like selling and buying. And that's prohibited on Shabbat. You mustn't have your shop open on Shabbat to sell and buy things, even if there's no prohibition involved. Even if, let's say, no money. You're saying, you tell the people, I allow you to purchase this and this, whatever you want from my shop, and Motzei Shabbat, I'll take the money from you. That's still not allowed because you're involved in business on Shabbat. What's the problem of that? Shema Yichtov. Chazal were concerned that while you're doing your business and buying and selling things, usually things that have to do in that, under those circumstances, usually people write down things. They want to remember. How should they remember that Ploni, this guy took so-and-so from my shop, another guy took this and this from my shop? How will they remember all that? They need to write it down. So Chazal were afraid that if we allow businesses to function as usual, even if there's no malacha involved, that one may come and do a malacha by writing. Shema Yichtov. That's why we're not allowed to have our shops open on Shabbat. By the way, there's only one situation where Chazal allowed, and it's perfectly fine to allow your shop to be open on Shabbat and people can take from it. Of course, you mustn't write, you mustn't accept money, nothing. It's just by relying on the people, trusting them that they will pay you during the week after Shabbat. What is that one case? If one has a grocery store with food that is edible on Shabbat, that can be left open and people can come in and take what they need and pay you Motzei Shabbat or Sunday, Monday, Tuesday the following week. That's when the people don't know. And it's actually, I heard of neighborhoods where this was actually done. The grocery stores were open on Shabbat for people to take from, and the owners relied on those people that they were trustworthy, that they would pay for what they took, for the groceries they took to use on Shabbat. The reason Chazal allowed that is because of Oneg Shabbos, because the need for food, edible food on Shabbat, creates a great, wonderful atmosphere in the house. People who don't have the food that they need, they're lacking some food, they feel a little bit saddened on Shabbat. We want them to feel happy, to feel satiated, to feel good. So we allow that. But no other merchandise and shops and businesses should be left open on Shabbat. Okay, Juliet is asking, what are madrichim who are teaching in shul? In shul. Aha. You mean like lecturing? Giving a lecture? Like that? Like a children's surveys. Okay. By the way, I'm familiar with such things. Usually the people who are involved in those things are completely voluntary. They're volunteers. They don't get paid for it. Anything you do and you don't get paid for, and it doesn't involve in malacha, that's no problem. That's not a problem. We're talking about a case where you do want money. You do want to get paid for it. That's a problem. In the UK, some places will pay. I understand. Okay, so that, I would view that definitely. Hagim, yeah, because it's really effort to deal with, to take care of the kids during the Chag, and you really put in, right, so parents can go to shul, right, so you put in a lot of effort, right.
Sorry, could I add to that question about babysitters on Shabbat and things like that? If, for example, you're having a simcha and you need to be running and doing things, if you get a little child to be watched to make sure he is occupied, or the baby, Would that fall under the same category?
And you're going to pay the babysitter, of course.
Yes, if you can hire Jewish or non-Jewish, it's, I guess, depends if you're able to find.
Of course.
Okay, so
a non-Jewish babysitter, no problem. Non-Jewish waiters, no problem. You can pay them, not an issue. Now, of course, not on Shabbat, but you pay them after Shabbat, not an issue at all, no problem. We're talking about a Jew who will work on Shabbat and get paid for what he does. That's problematic. So, again, in the case that Juliet was talking about, that's definitely a tzorach mitzvah. That's definitely a mitzvah occupation because they're dealing with kids in order to give them the right atmosphere of Chag, of Shabbat, and pray with them and teach them all kinds of things, all kinds of religious things. So that's definitely a tzorach mitzvah. So again, they're allowed to receive that money. They're not doing transgressing anything. But as we said before, even though it's a tzorach mitzvah, Chazal say that money won't be really beneficial. They won't really enjoy that money. It's not a blessing. It won't be blessed money. Now, what is the trick after all to receive money and yet be blessed with it and not have to lose it in some other circumstance in life? So before we answer that, we'll first discuss the case where we're doing things that are not for mitzvah purposes. So like the babysitting, they ask, so if you're going to a mitzvah event, like if you're going to a kiddush or a bar bat mitzvah, all kinds of things like that, so then definitely the babysitting is part of that mitzvah because it's enabling the parents to join the mitzvah event. But if you're going over to some friends just to chat, just to have fun, just to spend a few hours with some friends, and you want a babysitter to take care of your children at home, that's not a mitzvah purpose. So it all depends what purpose are you going out, and then that would depend if the babysitter is doing a mitzvah or not. Now, if it's a non-mitzvah job, you take a non-mitzvah job and you get paid for it, that's already not allowed. Not only do you not benefit from that money, you won't benefit from money anyhow, but you're not allowed to do so. That's a rabbinic prohibition to work on Shabbat, even if there's no malacha involved. You're getting paid for something taking a job, you're getting paid for it, not allowed on Shabbat because of what we said before, that it looks like mekach umemka, looks like you're buying and selling, looks like you're doing business, and that's not allowed because you may go and write. That's the whole issue here. Okay, now, how do we solve the problem of yet being able to work and receive money? And this solution would be true no matter if it's for mitzvah purpose or for non-mitzvah purpose. It doesn't matter. This solution works in all situations. And what is the solution? We call it havla'ah. Havla'ah means that it comes from the word to swallow, right? In Hebrew, livloah is to swallow. Havla'ah means that the money you get paid for Shabbat is swallowed within other monies you receive. Meaning, the salary you get or the payment you get is not solely and only for the work you did on Shabbat, rather you did some work on a weekday as well. So if you've done some work on a weekday as well, and they're paying you for that too, so what we do is we consider all the money you receive that is completely only for the job you did during the week, and you're doing the job on Shabbat for free. It's as if the work on Shabbat is free. All the payment you'll be receiving in the end is just for the work you did during the week on a weekday. That's how it works. Even though it's a little bit of a ha'arama, it's called, like sort of a dishonest way of looking at it. It's not so straight. It's not so real, because we know that if you, let's say again, as a waiter or a caterer, So you did a lot of work during the week, but the hours you've spent on Shabbat are definitely extra hours. And as if that was all for free, and you're getting extra payment for what we did on the weekday. It's not so real, but halacha allows this, because after all, don't forget that all this is only rabbinic, and even if it's a mitzvah, then it's not even rabbinically forbidden. It's just not blessed money. So now by doing this trick, we allow it. But the only, there's one condition here that has to be met, and that sort of takes away some of the situations where you would not be able to use this trick. And that is that you're not getting paid by the hour, rather by the job. If you're getting paid by the hour, then you can never assume that the payment of during the week work you did is really all the amount of money you get is really just for that, and what you did on Shabbat was free. Because you're counting the hours, including the hours you did on Shabbat, you're counting the hours as part of the payment. That's how we assess how much you'll be paid. So that's already specific for the work you did on Shabbat, and then you cannot do that. So let's say, what are we talking about? Let's say a waiter gets paid by the job, meaning they tell the waiter, for this one event, you'll receive 200 shekel. Okay, being a waiter for our kiddush or for our Shabbat meal, for the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, for the family event, you'll get paid globally 200 shekel. No matter how many hours you work. You could work 2 hours or 5 hours, you get same payment, 200 shekel. It's usually based on what normally the time it normally takes to do the job. That's usually what it's based on. But it's not really per hour. It's global per event. You're getting it for being a waiter during this event. Now, if besides waiting on the family during Shabbat, the same waiter would also clean up Motzei Shabbat, clean up the hall or the house. Or he would come Erev Shabbat, meaning before Shabbos, to set up the table. Or to receive all the food from the caterer, this waiter will be there also. So they're doing some work either before Shabbat or after Shabbat or both. So they're getting paid those 200 shekel for the hour, for the time they put into their work, into their job before Shabbat or after Shabbat. That's worth 200 shekel. On Shabbat, they're working for free. That's as if how it goes. Again, it's not real. It's not the real way that they perceive all this, but that's how halachically we're allowed to perceive it, and therefore we're allowed to get paid for the work. But again, if it's by the hour, problematic. You can't even swallow it within all the work you do during the week, or during the month. So for a babysitter, for example, it's really impossible because a babysitter never gets paid globally, or rarely is it so that a babysitter gets paid globally. A babysitter gets paid per the hour, by the hour. Even if sometimes the parents come back an hour and 20 minutes. They were out for an hour and 20 minutes. So they calculate an hour and 20 minutes. That's what the babysitter gets paid for, exactly by the moment. Not to the minute, but it's definitely something very specific. So even if she's babysitting for the same family during the week, that won't count as havla'ah to include the Shabbat as well, because she'll be paid for every single hour separately. Even if she gets the money together, that doesn't matter. The calculation is done separately, and that's the problem. So really, for babysitting on Shabbat, again, if it's for a non-mitzvah purpose event, then you can't even do that. She cannot even work for you. It's against halacha if she works for you and gets paid for it. Again, if she does it voluntarily, then fine, but not to be paid. And if it's for mitzvah's sake, she's allowed to do so, that she should know that her money won't be so much blessed to be able to use it. Okay, so that's it for work on Shabbat. I guess if you take a religious girl or a non-Jewish, take a non-Jewish woman or girl, then that's fine. She'll do the babysitting and you can pay her for it. Of course, Motzei Shabbat. If you take a Jewish, but she's a religious girl, and you explain to her all this, so they could be nice enough to volunteer. You need some help. Many times we ask them for a favor from someone to help us out. So they're asking for a favor. You can always reimburse her by a gift once in a while to buy her a gift. That doesn't connect in any way to the work she put in on Shabbat. Just give her a nice gift after a month or two that she's been with you several Shabbatot. Give her a nice gift. That's definitely fine. Token of appreciation without paying her specifically by the hour. Okay, let's continue. Some of the stuff that is in this chapter we've mentioned already in the past, so I won't review it again, but some of the cases are new. Here's another situation which is based on the non-Shabbos atmosphere, not so much a melacha per se. If you'd like to carry some stuff from house to house, outdoors, you're carrying stuff with you from house to house. We're not talking about the issue of the Eruv. That's a whole other topic. You have to be careful that there's an Eruv around the town, in that city, that you're allowed to carry things from place to place. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a case where a person would like to carry stuff that takes effort. It's heavy. It's cumbersome. And they're schlepping it from place to place, one place to another. So this is also problematic. Again, there's no actual prohibition involved. If it's not muktzeh and there's an eruv, so there's no prohibition. But the mere fact that you're working hard on Shabbat, and this is definitely for a non-mitzvah purpose. If it's a mitzvah purpose, then you're allowed to, no question. And here there's no siman bracha. It won't be blessed because here you're not getting paid. So there's nothing to bless or not to bless. So this is perfectly fine. For a mitzvah purpose, you're allowed. But to schlep stuff that's heavy furniture, or stuff that looks like you've just bought it. For example, you have a whole carton of drink, of sodas, whole carton, and you're schlepping it on your back or on your shoulder, place to place. That looks like you just bought it from the shop, because it's a whole crate of bottles, which is the way people sometimes buy. If they need a big, large amount of sodas, of drinks, they buy them in a crate or in type of box, and that would seem to people as if you bought it on Shabbat. So even if you carry them in bags, it's better than in a carton that looks all straight from the store. So these type of things we must try to refrain from. But this is only true outdoors. In the house, you can move things from place to place, no problem. Even if they're heavy, even if they look like you bought them, they're all like brand new stuff in their package, you're allowed to move from place to place in the house. But outdoors, it's problematic. Again, it ruins the atmosphere of Shabbat. Looks like a weekday. Okay, so that's another thing. Yeah, a lot of the things we mentioned already, Baruch Hashem, we've done we've gone through quite a lot of Hot Shabbat. So it's definitely nice to see we did a lot of the stuff. Yeah, here's something very, very practical and relevant. There are all kinds of halachot that there are differences between Eidot, between Sfardim, Ashkenazim, Yemenites, or even different types of Ashkenazim or Sfardim, Yemenites Some hold this way, some hold that way. We know as we've learned many examples, and we know there are many more, that there are disputes amongst poskim, amongst different groups within the Jewish world that hold differently about different halachic issues. Question is, when can one ask? Yes, that's also, of course, Judith is asking about, will we go through asking a non-Jew to do work for us on Shabbat? Of course, that would be a very, very important chapter. We're getting there quite soon, I believe. I'm just checking the book. No, there's still quite a lot. No, sorry, there's still quite a lot to do beforehand. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's towards the end of the book, actually. The issues of Amira Legoy is chapter 31, and we're in chapter 21. So 10 more chapters. We have a little time to wait for that. By the way, if you'd like, just came to mind, if you'd like, we can skip. We can skip to that chapter and do all that vast, important, and very detailed subject of how and when to ask a goy to do stuff for us on Shabbat, and then we can return to the normal sequence of the chapters. Whatever you feel like, you can give me an answer during the week, so I'll know what to do next week. But that's a good point. I didn't think of it. That it's also very, very, very relevant. It comes up many Shabbatot that we need to use the help of a non-Jew to do all kinds of things. So it could be that you'd like to do that first before we continue in the sequence of the book. Okay, anyhow, for now, we'll try to finish this chapter we're in now. So let's say there are differences between customs and between halachos of different groupings of Jews in our nation. When and how can we ask another fellow Jew to do something for us when he, the other fellow Jew, holds like his rabbi or his Eidah, his origin, is of such that allows this action, and the one asking for it does not allow the action. Let's give a few examples. We'll go to the most extreme example. The Rambam, as we mentioned several times, the Rambam holds, En bishul achar bishul belach. According to the Rambam, you're allowed to heat up soup that was pre-cooked before Shabbat. Of course, you mustn't cook on Shabbat, but it was pre-cooked. It was put in the fridge, and as Shabbat morning, you would like to put it on a plata or in a separation because of Michzik Mashel, but you want to put it to get hot, and it's going to get boiling hot, above 45 degrees on Shabbat itself. Rambam allows. No other postic allows this. Rambam allows. So, if Yemenites, who not, by the way, not all Yemenites go by the Rambam, but some of them do. There's a sect within the Yemenite origin that go by the Rambam strictly. Whatever the Rambam says, that's what they do. So, could you ask, as an Ashkenazic or Sephardic person, could you ask this Yemenite, who's a guest in your house or a neighbor of yours, to please place the soup Shabbat morning on the plata? If for them it's permitted, for you it isn't, can you ask them to do it for you? So what Julie brought up about asking a goy to do something for us, again, that's a whole long topic. But by a Jew, it's different. We won't go into now why is it different, but we're talking about since it's permissible for the person who you're asking him to do the job for you, so it's much less of a problem. But there's still a problem. There's still an issue here, and that is, depending how come, according to your rabbi or according to your group of Jews, it's not allowed, and according to his, it is. If the reason is because you hold something lechumra, meaning you know that it's really permitted, strictly halachically it's permitted, but you go by your rabbi tells you that you should be stringent about it, but there's definitely room and there's definitely an opinion, a major opinion to base the leniency on, then you are allowed to ask of this other Jew that holds by the lenient opinion to do that for you. Because he's not doing anything wrong. Even according to yourself, you realize that it's permitted. It's just you want to be stringent about it because that's how your rabbi taught you, but it doesn't mean it's not permitted. So for the other person, it's allowed, so you're allowed to ask him to do it for you. But if it's something that your rabbi or your teachings taught you, that your studies taught you, that it's something that's totally against halacha, and those who do it otherwise are wrong, although they do rely on their posek, so for them it's okay. But according to you, according to your opinion, based on your rabbi or your learning, it should be that everyone should accept it this way. All the rest are wrong because you have proof, solid proof from a Gemara or Chazal or whatever it is to prove your way. If that's the case, then you mustn't ask a fellow Jew to do that action for you because you're really making stumble over something that you believe he's doing wrong, even though he has a very important authority to base his action on. But sometimes we have disputes and one side argues against the other and disagrees with the other side. He doesn't say, yes, you're right, but I want to be stringent. You're wrong. This is not allowed. And yet the other side doesn't accept, refuses to accept. So he can go according to his leniency, fine. In his house, he can go according to his leniency because it's based on his rabbi. But you as a person who's based on a rabbi who says that everyone should be acting your way because he believes that's a true way and the other way is wrong, you cannot ask the other fellow Jew to do it for you. So in order to, each and every time we would like to ask someone to do something for us, if he's a Jew, we always have to understand what the origin of the prohibition is. If it's a chumrah or if it's really the halacha. Sometimes we're unaware of if it's this way or that. If we go to the soup, for example, then definitely Rambam is a very important and great authority that cannot go wrong totally. Can't be that he's totally wrong. It's impossible. He did his learning in such a deep and extensive manner that you can't just go wrong. It's just he understood the halacha different than others. So therefore, one is allowed to ask a Yemenite to put the soup on the platter for them while realizing that there's definitely a very important authority like the Rambam who allows them to do so. And even if their posting says, no, we mustn't do so. That's because we're based on other posting, but it's totally legitimate to rely on the Rambam and do so. So one can ask in a Yemenite Jew who follows the Rambam to do that for him, as long as that Yemenite Jew follows the Rambam always, and not just decides now to be lenient. That's not good because then he really doesn't believe in the Rambam's opinion normally. It has to be that he always goes by the Rambam, and therefore for him it's really permitted. There are all kinds of cases. For example, opening a bottle with a cap, a metal cap. Shlomo Zalman held that a metal cap mustn't be opened on Shabbat, like those of cheap wines or grape juice. They have metal caps on them. You cannot unscrew them on Shabbat. You have to open them before Shabbat. We won't go now into the distinction between a metal and a plastic cap. A plastic cap, Shlomo Zalman allowed opening on Shabbat. A metal one, he didn't. Rav Ovadia Yosef allowed both the metal type and the plastic type. In this case, Rav Shlomo Zalman felt that everyone else who does it differently is wrong because he understood the reality, the situation as such, that the metal cap is not allowed to be opened, not because it's based on a certain opinion and there's other opinions against. It's because that's practically what's going on in the situation, that you're creating a kli on Shabbat. You mustn't do so. So no one should be allowed to do so. So even though Rav Ovadia Yosef thinks otherwise, but if your posek is based on Rav Shlomo Zalman's opinion. So according to Rav Shlomo Zalman, no one should be allowing it. So again, we're not taking away from the legitimacy to rely on Rav Ovadia Yosef, whoever does, and open those caps for himself on Shabbat. That's fine. He has to rely on. But a person like myself, who relies on Rav Shlomo Zalman's opinion, and Rav Shlomo Zalman's opinion in this case holds that everyone should think so, because he thinks that's realistically what's going on here, that it's prohibited according to all poskim, then such a person, a student of Rav Shlomo Zalman, cannot ask a student of Rav Ovadia Yosef to open the cap for him. That's how it works. So again, it's very complicated to know when is it this way, when is it that way. Because you have to know the origins of every halacha and see what it's based on. So I would say in general, better to refrain from asking a fellow Jew to do something for you on Shabbat that you mustn't do, even though you know that for him it's permitted according to his poskim. I would refrain as much as possible from doing so. Same as we can't easily ask a non-Jew to do things for us. As we said, we have to get into all the detailed halachos relating to a non-Jew. For a Jew, it's what we said before. Is it a chumrah, or is it something that we believe is halacha for all? Should be halacha for all. That's what distinguishes between when we can and when we cannot ask a fellow Jew to do something for us. Better to refrain from asking them to do it for us, because then we're in trouble if we're not allowed to do so. Okay. Another situation. The other situation is sweeping. Sweeping on Shabbat. What could be the problem to sweep on Shabbat? So firstly, from the muktzah point of view, no problem. Because although the dirt you're sweeping from the ground is muktzah, from the floor is muktzah, because it's not useful, it's muktzah machmas gufo. But here you're not touching it itself, you're using the broom and the dustpan to lift everything up and throw it in the garbage. You're not touching the muktzah itself. So as we said, that's called tiltul min hatzad. You're moving it from place to place by using a permissible object to help you move it from place to place, and it's for a permissible reason, to have the floor clean, not for the purpose of the muktzah itself to be somewhere else. You want to get rid of the muktzah in order for the floor to be clean. So that's totally fine. So from the muktzah point of view, no problem to sweep. What could be a problem? The problem is when we sweep on dirt, on the actual earth, when it's not paved or there's no flooring on the dirt. Let's say in our backyards, when we have actual earth, no flooring, no pavement, there sweeping is not allowed. Why mustn't you sweep on earth? Because when you sweep, you flatten the ground. There could be some grooves, some holes in the ground. And as you're sweeping, you're smoothing it out. And that looks like preparation or after the fact of planting or choresh. Sometimes you create holes in the ground by sweeping, like you're moving a lot of dirt from one place and it creates a hole in the ground. So that's like choresh, that's like plowing. So it's like an involvement in agricultural work on Shabbat, which is definitely not allowed d'oraita. So even though we have no intent whatsoever to plant or to plow in the ground right now, you're just sweeping the dirt away. But Chazal, again, this is rabbinic, Chazal thought that this may look like you're involved in agricultural work, and that's not allowed on Shabbat, so it's a rabbinic decree not to sweep earth on Shabbat. So one, in your house you can, outdoors not. But there's another decree of Chazal. The decree was that if the majority of such areas in the city, in town, are non-paved or no flooring on it, then even if yours specifically has flooring, you mustn't sweep it either. Why? because then people may learn from you. Same as you're sweeping your backyard, they may sweep theirs. Now yours has flooring over it. That's fine from the strict point of view, that's fine. But then other people will say, wait, why is he sweeping his backyard? So do I. I want you to as well. And his is not, no flooring, his is actual earth. So since people may learn from you to sweep in backyards which have earth on them and no flooring, you mustn't do so even if you have flooring. So in the house, no problem. Because no one in our days lives in homes that have no flooring on them. No one lives on dirt in the house, earth in the house. So therefore in the house, we can all sweep. But in our backyard, since many homes don't have their backyard with flooring, rather dirt, earth, so therefore even if you do have flooring in your own private house, that's not good enough because we compare it to all the backyards in our town. Unless it would actually be that a certain town or a certain neighborhood, even a neighborhood is enough, a certain neighborhood or a yeshuv or whatever, that its backyards are at least majority with flooring, and then everyone can sweep them. Those who have flooring because the minority doesn't have, a minority doesn't count anymore, as if everyone has flooring. So that's what we distinguish about sweeping here, not sweeping there. Okay. Maybe one last thing, and then we'll finish. One or two last things very quick, and we'll finish the chapter. So it's a very short chapter, this one. Another thing that has to do with acknowledging the holiness of Shabbat and everything. One must refrain, or try to refrain, from doing a melacha that's not necessary for preparation for Shabbat, even before Shabbat. Let's say, from what time? From Mincha Ketana onwards. Mincha Ketana is 2.5 hours before Shkia. Okay? During the summer, it's approximately 4:30 in average. And in the winter, it's approximately 2:30 in average. So from 2:30 or 4:30 during winter and summer, you should try to refrain from being involved in anything that's not for preparing for Shabbat. Let's say you have a business or things you want to write up or work for schoolwork or things like that don't have anything to do with Shabbat. Better to refrain from doing so as of Mincha Ketana onwards. Those, the last 2.5 hours of Friday should be used solely and only to prepare for Shabbat. Again, that shows our respect and our involvement in making sure the Shabbat will come up, will come in nicely, and everything will be prepared and done properly. So I'm not saying if there's something very, very, very urgent, then it's okay. Don't take this as a very strict rule. But better if you refrain from it as much as you can from doing anything that doesn't have to do with preparation for Shabbat, as of 2:30-ish during the winter and 4:30-ish during the summer. Now, for asking for a goy to do something then for you, that's not an issue at all. To ask a goy, you can ask him to do something way, way further close to Shabbat, even into Shki'ah, until like 18 minutes into Shki'ah. Even then, you can even ask the goy to do things for you, as long as it's not full Shabbat yet, because the goy has no reason to prepare for Shabbat. They're totally free, and you're just telling them to do this and that. So that's not a problem. But for a Jew, better not, as of that moment and on. Of course, anything that has to do with preparation for Shabbat, you do as much as you need. All the malachos, all the effort, and everything. That's what it's meant for, the last moments before Shabbat. Okay, very last point. This may not be relevant anymore in our lives, but maybe once in a while, yes. Again, it has to do with the atmosphere of Shabbat. We used to have, maybe some still do, mechanical alarm clocks, not electric, not battery run, mechanical. the ones that you used to wind up. And they made this shrilling sound when the alarm was set. So question is, if it was set for a certain hour to wake you up, can you press the button so it shuts the sound or not? The answer is you can. Since it's only mechanical, there's no malacha involved. And to shut the noise is not a problem. To create the noise is a problem. To set the alarm to turn on during Shabbat, to set it for some time during Shabbat, that's not allowed because it's going to make a sound. But to shut it off as it's ringing, no problem. Of course, if it's electric, you cannot do that. Not turn it on and not shut it off. But if it's mechanical, you're allowed to shut it off. Can you wind the clock so it continues on? So the Ashkenazi poskim, Mishnah Berurah and others, they hold that you mustn't wind it. I'm sorry. One thing I'm mistaken. I'm looking at the book now. Sorry, I made a mistake. Even to set the clock on Shabbat, during Shabbat, and it should go on Shabbat sometime, you're allowed to even set it on. Because although you're not supposed to make noise with sounds with any instrument, but here it's gram hashmat kol. It's indirect. It doesn't sound immediately. It's not like playing a musical instrument which makes the sound immediately. Here it's going to turn on later on. And it's not such a it's not such a terrible prohibition to make something create sound. So if it's indirect, it's allowed. So you're allowed to set the clock to work sometime during Shabbat. You're allowed to shut off the alarm, the sound when it's on, but you mustn't wind the clock, even if it's now working. You mustn't wind it because it really makes it work for longer, and that's like tikkun mana. That's like making something function, even though now it's still working, but it should have finished working in an hour, and you're going to prolong it for 5 hours. So for those 4 extra hours, you're making it work, and that's not allowed. Definitely, if it stopped working, you can't wind it, that it should start working. Rav Ovadia Yosef, for the Sfardim, he allowed winding it while it's working, but not when it's shut off. When it's off, he did not allow winding it either. That's like creating a kli. That's like creating like fixing something on Shabbat, which you mustn't do. Okay, so that's it for today. We finished the chapter, short one on these topics, random topics. So next week, if you don't mind, Leah, taking a survey during the week and telling me if you prefer that we jump and skip to the chapter on Amira Le'akum and asking Goy to do things for us, or we should continue the sequence of the chapters of the book. Whatever you prefer is fine with me. Okay, take care. Have a great remaining
Thank you.
week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Call too.